It was a quiet meeting. No cameras, no press. No royal announcement, no formal guest list. Just a familiar face returning to a familiar place. But for those who know the history of power within the British monarchy, this was no ordinary visit. Michael Fawcett, once the most trusted aide to King Charles, was back inside the gates of Windsor Castle. The visit was described by some sources as a farewell audience, a private goodbye between two men whose bond once defined the inner workings of royal life. But in the world of royalty, where every meeting carries weight and every silence speaks volumes, the return of Michael Fawcett was more than a courtesy. It was a signal. This is Crownverse, where we read between the rooms and uncover the deeper currents beneath royal tradition. If you want to understand the pulse of power behind the monarchy, subscribe now, because the stories that shape the throne rarely happen in public. To understand the significance of this moment, one must return to the beginning of Michael Fawcett's story. For decades, Fawcett was more than just a servant. He was Charles's fixer, his confidant, his constant. Known for his discretion, his loyalty, and his influence, Fawcett began his royal career as a footman in the 1980s and climbed the ranks through sheer proximity and trust. He was there through scandal, through divorce, through transitions of household and fortune. He arranged events, he managed difficult staff, he kept problems quiet. To many within the palace, Fawcett became indispensable. In 2003, he briefly resigned after accusations of bullying staff, only to return shortly after in a different capacity. His influence never truly diminished. If anything, it grew quieter, more behind the scenes. Eventually, Fawcett took over as chief executive of the Prince's Foundation, managing Charles's charitable interests. It was a position of great responsibility, tied not just to money, but to reputation. And that is where everything began to unravel. In 2021, allegations surfaced that Fawcett had arranged honors, specifically a CBE, for a Saudi donor to the foundation, in return for financial contributions. The scandal was dubbed Cash for Honors. Documents reportedly linked Fawcett to direct discussions about the arrangement. The public reaction was swift. The whispers inside royal corridors were sharper. In short order, Fawcett stepped down from his role. An internal investigation was launched. The foundation acknowledged coordinated efforts to secure honors in exchange for donations, but stopped short of assigning personal blame. Legally, the matter remains unresolved, but reputationally, the damage was done. For many, this was the end of Fawcett's royal chapter. But Windsor opened its gates again. This recent private meeting, framed as a goodbye, raises delicate questions. Why was it held? Why now? And more importantly, what does it tell us about loyalty inside the monarchy? Charles has long valued personal loyalty above all else. Through decades of royal turbulence, he has kept a tight inner circle. People who know when to act, when to step back, and when to stay silent. Fawcett was perhaps the clearest example of that ethos. His fall was not a public severing, but a quiet release. There was no condemnation from the palace, no distancing from the king. Just an absence that spoke loudly. And now, the return. We do not know what was said inside the walls of Windsor. There are no official records, no photographs, no aides leaking details. Only that it happened, and that it was personal. The symbolism, though, is rich. Windsor is not just a residence. It is a fortress of memory. Kings and queens have mourned there, reigned there, died there. When someone is summoned to Windsor, it carries weight, especially in times of change. And right now, The monarchy is shifting. Charles's reign, though still young, is shadowed by illness. His son is rising in visibility. The institution itself is tightening, shrinking, modernizing. In that moment, a meeting with an old aide signals not nostalgia, but legacy management. Fawcett represents an era of monarchy that is quietly fading, an era in which loyalty was personal, where Aide served not the institution, but the man. His reappearance feels like the closing of a circle, a final gesture of gratitude, or perhaps a subtle reminder to others still within the royal machine. Loyalty is remembered. But it is also complicated. The Cash for Honors scandal, though brushed aside publicly, hangs over Fawcett's reputation. While the king was never formally accused of wrongdoing, the proximity was uncomfortable. It reminded the public that royal charity, despite its good, can become entangled with privilege, access, and influence. The monarchy survives on more than blood. It survives on trust. And when that trust is breached, whether through scandal or secrecy, the cost is long. By meeting with Fawcett now, the king risks reigniting those whispers. Even as a private act, the symbolism is potent. Some will view it as dignified, a farewell between friends. Others will see indulgence, a reluctance to break from the past. What cannot be denied is that this meeting brings the spotlight back to a man the palace hoped would quietly disappear. In the end, perhaps that is the truth of monarchy. It does not erase its shadows, it folds them into history. Michael Fawcett's chapter may now be closed, but the lines remain in the margins, for historians, for journalists, for watchers of the crown. So what does this mean for the present? It is unlikely that Fawcett will return to formal roles. His presence inside Windsor feels more symbolic than strategic, but it sends a clear message. The king does not forget those who stood beside him. And what of the future? As Prince William prepares to step further into leadership, his approach to loyalty may differ. He has favored a leaner household, younger advisors, and stricter boundaries. The days of powerful personal aides may be ending. The monarchy is becoming more professional, more transparent, or at least more conscious of public scrutiny. Still, moments like these remind us that beneath the glittering surface, monarchy is made of human relationships, of favors owed, of debts remembered, of friendships too long, too deep to sever with scandal. Michael Fawcett's name will not vanish from royal history. It will appear in footnotes, in chapters about transition, about privilege, about loyalty and risk. His final visit to Windsor may mark the end of a private era. And perhaps that is fitting, because this is what power does. It remembers. If you've found yourself intrigued by the quiet gestures behind palace walls, subscribe now. At Crownverse, we follow the stories others overlook, the ones that whisper from corridors and linger behind closed doors. This is where royal history lives on.